Let's begin.
Good morning, Patriot listeners. You are tuning into Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. And I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson. And we have two special guests again this week. We have Tim Miller, former representative, I think District 17A, and current Representative Mike Wiener from 5B. And we're going to eventually be picking up where we left off last week. But first, I think, Jeremy, why don't you kick us off and talk about our disastrous federal shutdown.
Oh, gosh.
How bad is it? How bad is it, Jeremy?
I absolutely love shutdowns because it hopefully gives people a taste for how limited government should work. I've criticized Republicans in the past because I usually think that shutdowns don't last long because they cave to this pressure, especially when the Democrats go out there and talk about the park service closing and you can't get reservations at the parks and things like that. So
if only more people would go to the parks when they were open, right?
Right. But it's important that everybody know that the essential services of the federal government are still continuing. It's only the non-essential services that are shut down. And in a country where we're $38 trillion in debt, and we are spending trillions of dollars every year that we don't have, and adding that to the nation's credit card, maybe we should start shutting down non-essential services. So the longer this lasts, and the more people realize they're still alive, I think that it's great for Republicans, bad for Democrats, and it makes the case on why we should shut down major federal agencies. Yeah, so I hope it continues.
I think that's a serious question we should all be asking, not just now, but all the time. If it's non-essential, why are we doing it? Because if it's not essential and I like it, I can always take the money that they don't take from me without my permission, just require, and I can give it where I want to give it to some other non-essential thing maybe. But to me is important. So this is really a great discussion that we are going to have as a country. If it's non-essential, why are we doing it? I bought one of those shirts, by the way. I just got delivered that says, should the government? Nope. I bought it. Just came. I'm going to wear it next week. So let's not match.
So I just want to say a liberal friend of mine was ranting on social media because she tried to make a reservation at a park for next summer. And the message that pops up on the USDA Gov website, it says the radical left Democrats shut down the government. This government website will be updated periodically during the funding lapse for mission critical functions. And then it says President Trump has made it clear he wants to keep the government open and support those who feed, fuel, and clothe the American people. That is the message that should be on every federal website. Yep. And I believe, Tim Miller, you said it's on someone's auto reply from the Department of Ed. This is just great. Republicans need to pound on this messaging.
Yep. Yeah, I think that they apparently have amended the auto reply for some of these agencies. So if anybody who emails them, the auto reply is no longer what the person said they wanted it to be, but now it's this message about the radical left.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there a shutdown under Obama for 13 days or something like that with Obamacare and the passage of Obamacare? So now, does anybody else remember that? What always gets me is how the media responds with the sky is falling if Republicans want to shut down the government, but if Democrats do it, then it's necessary and it's a good thing.
Well, and Mike,
so the response is what always gets me.
But Mike, in this case, it is the Democrats that have shut it down. It's the votes in the Senate that have shut things down. And dare I say, I'm very proud of my Republican leaders in Washington right now for holding the line on this. But remember that the bill or the bills or the continuing resolution that the Republicans want to pass still has plenty of cruddy stuff in it. And so the Democrats are really in a difficult position in that they are holding the line, and I'm thankful that the word is getting out on what they're holding the line on. I love that. I said this earlier. I love that the Republicans are having a little fun to make their point because we tend to be very serious as conservatives. But the whole sombrero and mustache thing is just hilarious, and it's getting people's goats. Is it inappropriate? Probably mildly inappropriate, not greatly, but a little bit. But it's great because it's conveying a message, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it was I sent Tim a TikTok of showing, it was an AI generated video showing Democrat politicians holding the line on providing health care for illegal immigrants, which is one of the main sticking points in this passage in the U.S. Senate. So Democrats want to give taxpayer-funded health care to illegal immigrants, and Republicans are drawing the line, saying it's not appropriate. And I think it's an 80-20 issue for the American public, where they don't want to spend all this money on healthcare for undocumented immigrants.
Well, and Jeremy, this ties into what we're seeing in Minnesota right now, and I'll let Representative Wiener get into this if he wants, but it's really all this fraud talk are all these dollars that the Democrats want to keep spending. And I don't like us spending it on who should we spend money on first or some of those conversations. But you and I were in office. We saw this all the time. This money is going at best to frivolous places, and now it's being exposed as it's being misused and misrepresented in its use. And that's coming to light under the Trump administration. And so even if you could argue, well, we need to be nice and kind to these illegal immigrants, guess what, folks? It's not getting to them anyway. It's going to power brokers who are keeping the money themselves.
Well, here's what I'm going to say about my personal knowledge about the healthcare premium issue, which is really critical because we are providing healthcare at no cost to people who are not contributing to the system. And that is absolutely ridiculous. But Medica, one of our carriers, is proposing 31% increase in premiums next year. 31%, they're the highest, right? People don't even realize this yet. They don't realize it because it hasn't hit them yet, their premiums. But it's not just that their premiums are going to go up. I have kids with some chronic health care needs, and I've already gotten phone calls from Medica case managers explaining, just the voicemail alone says that it's important that we understand that they have renegotiated their what they have to provide to their consumers, and that the state government is going to be, medical assistance is going to be assuming care now at a different level because they've negotiated a decrease in what is required of our healthcare providers. So not only are we going to pay 30% more for our healthcare, but, and that's just the premium, that doesn't count the deductibles and all that, but also the government is now going to take on more cost, right? Which is going to come back to us anyways as well. So the private sector is going to do what they did in the 1980s to early 90s. They are allowing insurance companies to dump healthcare issues onto the federal and state government. And this is disgraceful. But it's either they don't want to talk about, maybe part of this problem is we're providing an incredible amount of money to cover the cost of illegal immigrants, and it's all getting passed on.
And we certainly can say we can't afford it at this time.
Right.
Which, by the way, Representative Wiener, get ready for another reinsurance bill coming next year because that's part of what Medica is there. We're going to have to raise rates to where you're all going to have no insurance. That's and then reinsurance is going to come in and say, boy, without reinsurance, which, boy, there's going to be so many little topics that come up today that really are for future episodes. But reinsurance is another one of those ugly things to where basically you, the taxpayer, are underwriting some of the costs and certainly the profits of these insurance providers.
And by the way, how many voters have even ever heard about reinsurance? They don't even understand that it is an issue. Voters, people.
They don't. They're told the way it comes to the people is if you vote for this bill, it reduces rates. If you vote against this bill, it increases rates, which by the way, no one's been able to prove that to be true. The first time I saw that was in 2016, and I actually voted for it under the naivete that I was told we're going to do this. So reinsurance is really just throwing taxpayer dollars into the pile to lower the rates. That's really the theory behind it. Kind of like student loans.
Kind of like student loans. Prices go up.
Basically what it is. And at that time, we did have the individual market collapse, and I was told we have to do this just once, and then we'll fix things. Every year after that, they came with, we have to do this reinsurance thing. We have to do this and that first year, Blue Cross Blue Shield, I forget the exact dollar amount, but it was into the hundreds of millions of dollars. They shifted that insurance money to their other states.
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to thank
we'll talk about more of the socialism aspect of this when we get back from the break. But get back from
thanks everybody for listening. I'm telling you, the political pitchforks are coming, and we hope you come back in a couple minutes and continue the discussion with us. Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. This is Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson and Representatives Mike Wiener and also Tim Miller, former rep. And we are going to head right over to Mike Wiener. He has some great perspectives on why all this is happening, what's going on at the federal level and the state level. And he wrote a letter that we're going to end up talking about today to the governor, expressing his serious concerns about the processes and what's happening in our state. So, Mike, let us have it.
Sure. Basically, the letter was spelling out the process. The governor has called for a special I take that back. He has said that he would call for a special session having to deal with gun control in the state of Minnesota after the Annunciation shooting. You know, we had the Hortman shooting, Hoffman shooting, and basically he got a little bit over his skis, maybe, no, let's be honest. He's using this as political theater. Mm-hmm. The governor has all of the control. He has all of the power to call the special session, and him only. And as the statutes lay out, I looked it up and I thought they're having this discussion between leadership, but that's not the way the statutes, the way our laws are intended to work. So why is this even going on? Why is there even discussions? If you want to call the special session, call the special session. I did clarify, I wanted some extra information because of the power sharing agreement in the tied house. I wanted to make sure that there was nothing written in there that would limit us in a special session. So I checked into that, made a couple phone calls, found out there was nothing in there and said, well, maybe it's time to remind the governor. But then also a big part of this is educating people. You know, I haven't been around politics for very long. We were just discussing this the other day. I started going to the BPOU meetings and getting involved, and I couldn't even tell you what a CD was at that time. People would throw the term out CD7, and I went, what's CD7? I had no idea. So that was only about 5 years ago. And I would say I've learned a lot since then.
You've got a great trajectory, let's just say.
But now, in that 5 years, I see and I read the way government is supposed to work, how our laws, statutes, rules are laid out. And then what we're doing isn't even close to that in some situations.
Mike, let me just, so for people listening, the way that the process works in the Constitution is that the governor can call a special session of the legislature. So he makes the request. Then leadership comes to, or then the legislators come to St. Paul, they gavel in, and then the legislature sets the agenda. They're the ones that introduce bills all over again. It's a whole new session.
Yep.
They have to introduce new legislation. They set up committees. They send those bills over to committees to debate it. They'll let the public come in and testify on it, and then they can send it back to the House and Senate floors for final passage.
3 days, three readings.
Yeah, there's a constitutional requirement that every bill be heard on the floor on 3 separate days. All those things apply to a special session. So typically what happens is there's these backroom deals between the governor and leadership to kind of preset what's going to happen. And they concoct this enormous multi-subject omnibus bill. And then they also have to have a supermajority of both the House and Senate who are going to suspend the Constitution's requirement that bills be heard on 3 separate days. In like some kind of sense of emergency. If there's a sense of urgency, they can suspend that requirement and then just cram everything through, usually without anybody being able to amend the bill. There's like an agreement. All this kind of stuff is preset. So we have a special session that lasts 1 day and all this junk gets passed in one single day. And that's frustration.
And to be clear, there's a role for special sessions. The most common and easiest one to understand is if there's a natural disaster. Let's say the Red River Valley has incredible rains and we have cities literally wiped out. National Guard needs to be involved. The governor, the executive branch, has a degree of ability to do things during those times, but the real money spent, the real allocation of resources, that sort of thing has to be passed legislatively. So they get together, and that makes sense. You come to an agreement that we're just going to limit it to this so you don't have people throwing all sorts of other stuff. We're just going to have special session long enough to take care of this disaster. The problem is because the governor in Minnesota, by nature of the system right now, carry so much power, especially in front of cameras. They say, well, we have an emergency. In this case, it's gun control, which is absolutely nonsense. But we have this emergency, and I'm going to call the legislature, and I look forward to working through this, and this, and we're just going to have it happen. Well, first of all, it's not the governor's role to legislate. He's the executive branch. So it's already out of whack there. And then you have the legislature, which you have a House and Senate. And mind you, so that people understand, even if they're both held by Republicans or both held by Democrats, the House and Senate typically doesn't agree with each other on very many things. It's a process. And it's designed to be.
And the rules are different.
And the rules. And it's designed to be methodical, to be contemplative. There's words like that come out about the legislative process that totally vanishes under special session when you agree to 1, 2, or 3 days.
Right. So I just wanted to give some context to listeners. When I read Mike's letter to the governor, I'm like, yeah, make the governor request a special session and stop all these backroom negotiations with leadership and trying to, turn around and then make a political point that Republicans aren't going to support gun control. Because the real honest truth is Democrats, rural Democrats, have already come out and said that they won't support gun control. So don't point your finger at Republicans. Maybe we should just support the Second Amendment, period.
And Jeremy, I want to make one thing clear before you go and Representative, make one thing clear, because I think about the detractors listening to this who are actually on our side, and they're saying there have been no backroom conversations. There's been no deals. That part is obvious. But I've watched the press conferences of the House and Senate leadership. I've seen the governor. By the very nature of government, they're going to be having conversations, okay? The very nature of those conversations, they are in offices with just a handful of people. So backroom deals may be a bit strong at this point, but it frustrates me when people say, there's no conversations going on. There's nothing happening. I go, the governor wouldn't be doing what he's doing, and he's trying to manipulate and win the game. I understand that, and it's an unholy thing that he's doing. But it frustrates me because people need to understand, he's saying he's going to call special session for Monday. He thinks he is. He always kind of gives himself a wiggle room. And Representative Wiener, I want to know what your opinion is about Monday in a second. But he can't be saying that in a vacuum of the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader in the Senate saying, nope, we're not talking to him at all. That's just nonsense.
I think he's trying to put pressure on to get the desired outcome. Right. You saw a press conference yesterday with doctors from doctors from the hospitals that treated some of the denunciation victims. So that's just applying more pressure, but we got to back up a little bit too. And you talked about the outstate senators. So go back and look at the trifecta. That was the first year I was in office. And the Democrats could have passed any bill they wanted. They had gun control bills that were written up and were discussed. We had town hall meetings on this. We had constituents who were very upset and did not want to see Second Amendment attacked. And there was the red flag laws and binary triggers that ended up getting passed. But point being, the legislation that they're talking about now, the assault weapon ban, high capacity magazines, was written up and presented during the trifecta, and they didn't pass it. So your viewers or listeners have to realize that why didn't they pass it then? Why didn't the Democrats push every gun control bill that they wanted through during the trifecta? And it was because of politics. Mm-hmm. It was because of elections. It would have put their 4 Senate seats at risk. Kupek, Seeberger, Putnam, and Housechild. Now, Kupek has even come out recently and said he's not in favor of gun control laws. How do you expect this to pass through the Senate right now as it currently stands if you've got Democrat senators out in greater Minnesota who are saying they're not in favor of this? So there again, this is political theater. It is what I believe he's trying to rally the Democrat base behind something for his next governor race. This is going to be the mantra going into 2026. And it's a distraction from the fraud.
So Representative, you just hit it right there. But quick question before we maybe move on to that. So Representative, you drafted a letter, you sent it to the governor, you posted it on social media former Representative Munson has some numbers on that. But what has been your personal response, number one, and number two, have you had any response from people that are in the Beltway, as they say? What has been the response to your letter that you sent?
From the public, it's been very well received. And Jeremy had talked about some numbers. I'll let him share that. Everybody, people who are not really political, who have read the letter said, well, this was eye-opening. Why not? Why doesn't the governor just call it? Other people who kind of understand politics a little bit more are saying, yep, this makes sense. To me, I didn't think the letter was really going to blow up like it has. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect, and I don't expect a response from Comrade Walls. I don't think he's going to, but it was just a way of publicly putting it out there that this is the process. We as legislators cannot get excluded from this process. No backroom deals. We're going to sit down and talk about it. Inside of politics, there's some people who haven't been happy with the letter. Felt kind of that I stepped on maybe some leadership's toes and stuff. But really, this is, once again, like I said, I'm new to politics myself, and to educate people is the biggest part of this. If somebody wants to get offended, that wasn't the intention. It was simply to lay out the process so that everybody knows that we can do this when the governor calls it.
Sounds like we need to get some steel-toed boots for some of those people in the legislature. So we're going to just wrap up the session, come back, and probably start right up again, right where we are. So please join us again in a couple minutes. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson and Representative Mike Wiener and Tim Miller. And we are talking about special session. And I do just want to note the irony of us talking about needing special sessions in Minnesota while we're surrounded by fraud. Meanwhile, the federal government is shut down to prove that we don't need government at all. So we have this, I think, very interesting dichotomy going on in our state versus federal government discussion generally as conservatives. Because really, it does show the point of where we're at. We have to have a special session to do things that we couldn't get done when we should have gotten it done before. So I'm going to kick it over to Jeremy, who served through many special sessions, and tell us what you think. Are we going to have one, not going to have one, and why it could happen?
Well, I think that the risk of a special session is pretty high. I don't think that they're going to have a special session to pass sweeping gun control legislation as proposed by the Democrats. And, some of these bills are actually banning shotguns from being sold and from in any private transaction of a shot. Basically, if you have a shotgun, you can't sell it again. There's some really, really restrictive ones talking about the size, any gun that's over like 50 caliber projectile, which would be any shotgun capable of shooting a slug. And so I don't think there's going to be major sweeping legislation for gun control. However, Republicans are being pressured to do something about, I'm going to use air quotes, gun violence, which I think is a horrible, horrible term.
Terrible term.
That the Democrats have just created out of thin air to say gun violence is the act of when someone commits violence using a gun. And instead of blaming the person, they're blaming the gun. And I got after a couple of Republicans that put out press releases talking about they don't, that the real solution to gun violence is this or this or this. And it's like, stop using that terminology. Don't give into the Democrats that it's the guns.
How
that are
about
the
knife
problem.
violence, fist violence, word violence? Is it ever going to become the new deal?
We have mental health problems. But my point is, I think that the risk of a special session is high because you only need one Republican in the House to cave. And then the Democrats can do whatever they want to get stuff through. And there are 3 Republicans in senior leadership positions in the Minnesota House who are putting together campaigns to run for statewide office in Minnesota, which requires that they get about 200,000 people that voted for Tim Walz to vote for them. So they are running in the very centrist lane, and they want to have something accomplished on, solving gun violence. And that might be for, giving $2 million to every school district in the state to go put bulletproof glass or whatever Republicans kind of want to paint it as. but it's going to be a massive spending bill, a bunch of other stuff that gets some, conservative priorities done or Republican priorities. And that's what they want to try to accomplish in a special session.
But then don't you think, if that's the case, Jeremy, that this still comes back to political theater?
Oh,
How-
absolutely.
For sure it is.
Well,
Yeah.
Paul's efforts here is to bolster his own chances in the next election cycle. Other aspects on the Republican side are looking at how to make themselves look better in the next campaign cycle. But then, are we really looking at solutions then?
We're not looking at solutions that are going to really work. I mean, look, maybe a third to half of the programs that come through the legislature are basically just taxpayers funding for campaign mailers.
Exactly.
And bullet points on campaign mailers. Did they solve when we had the meth crisis and they passed a bunch of laws making you now have to buy Sudafed behind the counter? Did it solve the problem? No, they just switched to some other chemicals. But the taxpayers paid for these programs, gave the politicians some talking points on their mailers, and these are the solutions that taxpayers are going to be forced to fund if the legislature comes back for a special session.
See, that is one of the most frustrating aspects of politics, is we're not even looking for solutions sometimes. We're simply looking at the best way to affect the next election cycle. That is the most frustrating thing to me. And I'll change it a little bit. Let's look at homelessness in the state of Minnesota. How many hundreds of millions of dollars do we have to spend on homelessness? And yet when you look at the number of homeless people in the state of Minnesota, it has only increased. The more we spend on this, the more homeless people we have.
Build it and
So
they will
what are
come.
we- And don't the taxpayers, I mean, we have to open their eyes to some of this too, because you're getting fleeced. When you go work a job and more of your taxpayers' dollars or your dollars are getting spent on programs which solve nothing, which
Well, and if
takes care of no problems. And
Yeah,
yet
right.
you're struggling to put food on the table. It's the feeding or the free lunch for schools. And we hear from reps and senators that people out there are hurting. They can't make ends meet. We've got to supply them with free food. Well, stop taking their money in the first place so that they can afford their kids' lunch. This is the disconnect that I look at and I go, this is ridiculous. What problems have we actually solved in the last 2 years or 2 election cycles that I've been in the House
I can
by
tell
throwing
you,
money on?
I can tell you
And
the average
Vent
family,
a little bit.
the average family in Minnesota could provide their kid with a cold lunch far cheaper than what it costs us for the school lunch program, because it's not what we pay, it's what it costs to administer it. So it's all a game. Everything you're talking about is a game. Healthcare, they overregulate and then they force people to pay for it. So we know that this is the problem, and we think that the Republican Party should be standing united against all of it in every area. But it's become so cumbersome, it's almost as though people don't even know where to start. It's like cleaning up your house after a tornado goes through, and you don't even know where to start to begin to clean up the mess. We have created a bureaucracy that is so overwrought. They spend more time in committees trying to figure out how to do new things, not the legislature, the people in these agencies, right? They literally they're doing it in DHS right now. They're revamping the entire program for people who are disabled. They're months behind schedule. I literally met with two people from Hennepin County a week and a half ago. They have no idea how to even do what they're being told to do. If you call the DHS, they don't even know what's happening. The agencies don't know and they added a layer of bureaucracy in to do something that was already being done, which I guarantee you is going to go to fraudulently fund people who are doing nothing. But this is how it works. They've created a maze of it's an impossible maze to get yourself out of unless you break it down and rebuild it.
The culture in St. Paul is not policy driven. It's money driven. Right. It's FTE driven. Mm-hmm. So it's how many FTEs. So Jeremy has seen this. Representative Wiener has seen this. When a bill is presented, it has a fiscal note attached to it. It has number of new jobs attached to it, not like the other person can do it. And it's again, when I state things, when I explain things, I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just telling you what I've witnessed and what I've seen. And so there is this reaction to, okay, what is it going to cost? What's going to cost this? Well, then we can swallow costing that. What's really funny is that if they say it takes $10 million to fix this problem, they'll negotiate at the end of year $3 million. Well, you spent $3 million when you said it cost 10. And I can give you many examples of where the absurdity shows up with that. I'm not saying spend the 10. I'm saying that, oh, we have this horrible problem, but they want the money. And the way that you vote is through these money. That's why the budget has ballooned every single year. You have, and I caught myself doing this. You write a bunch of bills and people say, you talk about wanting to cut spending, and those 3 bills over there cost X amount of millions of dollars. And there are so many things that can be done through policy changes that would have the effect of probably saving money too, by the way, but would actually address fixing whether you call it a problem or a priority or something that we believe the state should be doing. On the way here, I was listening to something on education, and Minnesota has gone down the dumper with reading levels, just gone down the dumper. And we saw it happening when I was in office, okay? The problem is not the money, it's how they're teaching. And I'm not even knocking the teachers, because the teachers are being told this is the way you're going to teach it,
They've
even when
literally
the teachers
been taught to teach something that doesn't work.
So fix that problem. Fix to teach that they can teach a kid how to read so that they're prepared.
Remember when our parents taught us to read before we went? Remember how they'd read to us at night and we learned how to read with our parents? Remember that? Who remembers that? I remember that.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember.
We've lost all sense of how to do things the right way. And we don't, honestly, I think people don't know how to get back. This is the problem. And we expect Republicans to be the grownups in the room, to stand up and say, wait a minute, this is insane. Why are we doing this? This is wrong. But we aren't doing it. We need people like Mike and, when you were there, Jeremy, we need our Republicans to be willing to stand up and call out the truth, which is that we're paying for garbage everywhere we look.
Well, and what I like about what Representative Wiener is doing is he's going to the people and he's explaining things in a digestible way. Information tends to embolden people. And so, and Munson does that a lot. I do it when I have the opportunities. I think an informed citizenry is what a republic is all about. And I really appreciate Representative Wiener doing that with this letter.
And I do believe we need to personalize it for people. Because a lot of times what we do as Republicans is we talk numbers, facts, but we don't put it into perspective for people in their pocketbook or how it affects their daily lives. So this is my second term. The state budget has gone up almost $17 billion. Okay. And people can't really even imagine what $17 billion looks like or how it affects them. So you got to break it down. Well, if we have for every $1 billion worth of spending budget increase in the state of Minnesota, how does that affect you? So let's do the math. There's 5.6 million people in the state of Minnesota. Divide $1 billion by 5.6 million comes just under $200, right?
Wait, but that's per person.
Right.
Exactly. Quit interrupting, right. Please.
You gotta go fast. We're coming up to a break.
But that is exactly my point. So that's per billion, almost $200 per person. But you take out under 18 years old and over 65 because most of them aren't working or not paying much in. So you got to take that number and increase it. So I sat down with a professor and I said, I really want to know your thoughts. Let's look at the ins and outs in this.
10 seconds.
And when we up $17 billion, $200 a person is $3,400 out of your pocket every budget cycle.
All right, Mike, we got to come back after the break and finish this conversation.
Yep. Welcome back to Political Pitchforks. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson, Representative Mike Wiener, and Tim Miller. I would like to remind people of a couple things. Preamble to the Minnesota Constitution. We, the people of the state of Minnesota, grateful to God for our civil and religious liberty and desiring to perpetuate its blessings and secure the same to ourselves and our posterity, our children, do ordain and establish this Constitution. And the object of government is instituted for the security, benefit, and protection of the people in whom all political power is inherent. That's at all, not some. Together with the right to alter, modify, or reform government whenever required by public good. And I hope what people are starting to think about as we move towards elections in 2026 is that it is the inherent power of the people to stand up and send a message to our government that it is not serving the people. It is not protecting the people. It is not following our constitutional directive and mission. And I just think that at some point we have to all be willing to say to our neighbors, our friends, the people we go to church with, guys, we got a problem in Minnesota. So with that, Jeremy, I'll let you talk a little more about what that problem is.
Well, you know what, Mike, before we went on the break, he was talking about trying to take the $17 billion surplus that the Democrats wasted and put it into real terms that people can kind of relate to, because $17 billion is hard to imagine, just like billions on the federal level. Same thing. When I was in office, we had a surplus and of
Those were the
billions of
days.
dollars extra money of surplus that the Democrats wanted to spend. And so I wrote a bill called the Give It Back Act that was going to return the money to the taxpayers. I wanted to return it in the right percentage or proportion, but putting it in real terms to say, look, this is $15,000 per family. That's a serious check. It isn't just this little, $200 or $2,000 like Tim Wells. $15,000 per tax-paying family. That was an enormous amount of money, and people could relate to that. Republicans need to do better on messaging. And there was a show on Thursday night called "A Precarious State" that aired on KSTP on primetime, talking about the state of politics in Minnesota and how there's an outflow of taxpayers and we're running into a major problem. I think it was good messaging. It wasn't as conservative as I'd like to see it, but it was trying to go after the centrist people, the centrist voters, saying, look, it is time for change. And that is an important message that we need to do ahead of the 2026 election. Before we run out of time today, I know that Tim Miller had a little quiz for the three of us. He wanted to do some a political quiz or quotes. So I want to kick it over to Tim. Tim, tell us what your quiz is about.
Well, I think we need to have fun. I mentioned the sombrero and the mustache earlier. Us as Republicans, rightly so, we take the condition of our country and state very seriously. But words mean things, we've been told, and it's always funny, when you hear a quote from someone, you say, well, first of all, that wasn't in context, or who said that? So I wanted to do a little quick game called Who Said That as an after dinner mitt to what we're doing here. Now, I don't want to get into the politics of what was said in this quote or the context, just who said that. And so I have 3 questions, one for each of you, and it's a multiple choice quiz for each of you. So Representative Wiener, since you're the guest of guests, I'm going to go with you first. Okay. So first question, who said that? The blank administration is reviewing ways to improve benefit eligibility verification to crack down on welfare fraud by illegal aliens. Was that Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, Ronald Reagan, or other? The blank administration is reviewing ways to improve benefit eligibility verification to crack down on welfare fraud by illegal aliens.
I think it was Tim Walz.
Wrong. It is other. The answer is President Bill Clinton. The next one, and I need to read this quickly because it's a little bit longer. For the Jewish people, the journey to the promise of a state of Israel wound through countless generations. It involves centuries of suffering and exile, prejudice and programs, and even genocide. Through it all, the Jewish people sustained their unique identity and traditions, as well as a longing to return home. And while Jews achieved extraordinary success in many parts of the world, the dream of true freedom finally found its full expression in the Zionist idea, to be a free people in your homeland. That's why I believe that Israel is rooted not just in history and tradition, but also in a simple and profound idea, the idea that people deserve to be free in a land of their own. So, Representative Munson, who said that? Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, Ronald Reagan, or other?
I'll go with Reagan.
Incorrect. The answer is other. It was none other than President Barack Obama. Dun, dun, dun. I need you can edit in the music there at that moment. So the third question goes to you, Susan. In my own native state, the battle for American freedom was begun by thousands of farmers and tradesmen who made up the Minutemen, citizens who were ready to defend their liberty at a moment's notice. Today, we need a nation of Minutemen, citizens who are not only prepared to take up arms, but citizens who regard the preservation of freedom as a basic purpose of their daily life and who are willing to consciously work and sacrifice for that freedom. The cause of liberty, the cause of America, cannot succeed without any lesser effort. So, Susan, was that Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, Ronald Reagan, or other?
It's definitely going to be other. It's going to be some Democrat from maybe Walter Mondale.
You're learning. The answer is true. That is other. And this is someone who probably I most relate to these days, unfortunately, but is true. John F. Kennedy.
Kennedy.
Yep.
Yeah, he'd be joining with his pseudo namesake, his
And the
nephew today.
The point of our little fun
Yep.
quiz on a serious moment, and I'll end this here
Yep.
just in a moment so you can wrap it up. But so much of the dialogue that's coming from people like me that are considered, I was called a Nazi for my first time yesterday. I feel like I'm no longer a virgin, but Nazi virgin anyway. This is hateful speech. This was common dialogue. This is the roots of who America is. And if you go further back in time, I can, of course, pull out many more quotes. One of the things I appreciate about the Trump administration and what MAGA is all about is we are regaining our identity as the United States of America, and that is so important. There are people, even on the Democrat side, that agreed with this in years past, and that has been lost.
I think the trick here is that I think there are Democrats today who agree. I think the difference between Democrats and Republicans historically was how big you thought government should be and whether you should be relying on government or the private people to take care of your community. And Republicans believe in less government generally, and Democrats believe in more government. But historically, Democrats loved America. That's not true anymore. The base of the Democrat Party has moved away from being pro-America to being anti-America. But the people in the middle, the average Democrat, the Democrat over 30 years old, those people are looking around thinking, how did we get here? But they don't understand the Republican Party. They don't know about the Republican Party. We have no media. I mean, Alpha News, sort of. We have no media that truly tells the truth, not Republican truth, not Democrat truth, but actual just facts truth. We've lost the truth. It's always spun some way. Here's what we know. Being America first is not being a Nazi. It's being a citizen of a country. There's nobody in the Republican Party wanting to get rid of everybody who's not blue-eyed. That's just a lie. It's not a truth, right? The truth is, in America, we are a country made up of millions of people from all different communities, societies, histories, backgrounds. If you're an American, you have a duty to protect your country. That is America. So all of this that we're talking about today gets back to that issue. And Democrats need to find a way to have the courage to say to their party, you left us. And I don't know, Jeremy, if you think they're going to do that, but Democrats have to do that, and Republicans have to stand firm with theirs.
I think that Elon Musk and some other conservatives on social media have been posting video snippets of Chuck Schumer, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, JFK, reminding them of speeches similar to what Tim was just posting about how their positions, 10, 15, 20 years ago are seen as extremist right-wing ideas now. I mean, Barack Obama, who was president just then, was against gay marriage. Like, there's so many things that my friend Jim Hagedorn used to always say that, the Democrats have shifted so far left, they've left the party. Right. They people need to realize that, and kind of reposting that stuff and reminding people of these ideals of the Democrats that Republicans are agreeing with now is extreme.
Right.
I think when you've got a commentator like Bill Maher who is pointing out some of these problems in the Democrat side, it's very telling. Not that I agree with a lot what Bill Maher says, but he's seeing this too and saying this has gone way too far.
Yeah. Well, Representative Wiener, I want to thank you for being on the show today. Can you just let everybody know your website so they know how to get in touch with you?
My official one, I couldn't even tell you what it is. Look it up
your
on
campaign site.
Oh, M Wiener for House, the number 4.
M Wiener for House. Yeah. Thank you very much. And to Representative Miller, thanks for also being on the show today.
We'll be back next week. We thank you for listening.